I arrived with my friend to check out the rental.
The front yard is nicely kept. Let's hope the inside is just as good.
When things finally fell apart between me and my parents, I didn't have anywhere solid to land. I was 24, broke, exhausted, and running out of couches to crash on. I spent weeks scrolling through roommate apps, apartment listings, and dead-end ads that either looked like scams or were way out of my budget. Then one listing stopped me. A man named Luke was renting out a room in his 3-bedroom, single-story home for $1,200 a month. The pictures looked clean, almost too clean, and the ad described him as a pharmaceutical sales rep who traveled 4 to 5 nights a week. In other words, I'd basically have the house to myself. For someone desperate, stressed, and almost out of money, it sounded perfect. Luke replied to my message within 10 minutes. Polite, short sentences, no emojis. I asked Marcus, my most paranoid friend, to come with me to see the place. He was the type who wore suspicion like an accessory. Good person to have around when you're vulnerable enough to overlook red flags. The house was tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac where every lawn looked professionally trimmed and every driveway was empty, like the neighborhood itself had been paused. Luke opened the door before we even knocked. Late 30s, neatly combed hair, polo shirt, khakis, and a smile that felt pre-programmed. "The room is down the hall," he said. His voice was calm, almost monotone. Inside, the place looked staged, only the essentials. Nothing personal, no photos, no decorations, no clutter. The kind of house that felt lived in but not by a human. Marcus was already suspicious. "You don't have much stuff," he said. Luke nodded, like he had heard that a million times. "I'm a minimalist, less distraction." The room he was renting out was genuinely nice, bigger than most I'd seen for twice the price. A private half bath, clean bed, dresser, fresh paint. I knew right away I was going to take it. Even Marcus's quiet frowning couldn't talk me out of it. Luke brought out the lease. While I signed it, he recited a short list of rules, just 3 of them. Keep common areas spotless. No overnight guests without notice. Never enter the master bedroom or the basement. He blamed insurance liability. I didn't care, I just needed a place to sleep. For the first couple of weeks, I barely saw Luke. He left early, came home late, and half the time he was supposedly in another city. Honestly, it felt like living alone. Quiet, easy, predictable. Then one Tuesday afternoon, something broke that illusion. I came home early from work. Luke's car wasn't in the driveway, and according to the schedule he kept on the fridge, he wouldn't be home for another 3 days. But there was a glass of water on the kitchen counter, fresh, ice still floating, condensation dripping down the side. I stared at it for a long minute, feeling a cold pressure settle behind my eyes. I lived alone when Luke traveled. I hadn't poured this. Maybe he came home for something, I told myself. Maybe he left in a rush, but a knot formed in my stomach that I couldn't shake. That night, the house felt charged, heavy, like it was waiting for me to notice something. Around 11 p.m., just as I was about to turn off the TV, I heard a sound. Not the random pop of a settling house. It was the sound of a footstep directly in the hallway behind me. I muted the TV. My heartbeat went berserk. Another creak closer. I grabbed the metal flashlight from my backpack and stood up, forcing myself to speak. "Luke?" Silence. I stepped into the hall and shined the light around. Nothing. But the basement door was shut. Luke's master bedroom was shut, and a cold instinct crawled across my skin. Something wasn't right. I slept with a doorstop wedged under my bedroom door that night. 3 days later, something worse happened. I woke up, went to the bathroom, and reached for my toothbrush. It was wet, dripping wet, like someone had rinsed it seconds ago. A wave of revulsion hit me so hard I gagged. I threw it in the trash immediately and called Marcus. "That's it," he said. "Get out of there. Check for cameras. The guy is messing with you." I told him about the footsteps, the water glass, everything. He didn't hesitate. He's still in that house, man. I guarantee it. I hung up and began checking every room, vent, and shelf. Nothing obvious popped out. Then I found myself facing the basement door. Luke's rule echoed in my head. Do not enter the basement under any circumstances. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I shouldn't have, but I needed to know. The lock was old, easy to pop with a flathead screwdriver. My hand shook as I twisted the metal. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of stale, freezing air. I flicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The stairs moaned under my weight. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. The basement was mostly empty, except for stacks of boxes, a large wooden door on the far wall, and a lone workbench with a laptop sitting on it. I opened the laptop. It woke instantly, no password. 4 camera feeds appeared on the screen. Living room, kitchen, hallway, my bedroom. The angle of the bedroom feed was strange, low, tilted upward. Then I realized it was coming from the heating vent in the floor, pointed straight at my bed. My skin crawled. Then something else moved on the screen. In the living room feed, the front door opened. Luke walked inside, but he wasn't wearing business clothes. He was in a black hoodie and jeans, holding a tire iron. He didn't look around, didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward the basement door. Then he stopped and stared directly into the camera like he knew I was watching. A slow, deliberate smile spread across his face. He stepped out of frame. A second later, I heard it in real life. Thud. A boot hitting the top basement step. He wasn't rushing. He was savoring it, and now there was nowhere to go. My flashlight beam skimmed across the basement walls until it fell on the heavy wooden door at the very back. The root cellar. I sprinted toward it, killed my flashlight, and slipped inside, closing the door just as Luke's flashlight beam washed across the basement floor. I held the doorknob with both hands, pressing my weight against the wood. There was no lock on my side. His boots reached the bottom of the steps. "Benjamin," he called softly. Too softly. "I know you're down here." I squeezed my eyes shut, barely breathing. "Shame," he continued, voice drifting closer. "You are doing so well." He smashed the laptop. I heard it. Plastic cracking, glass shattering. Then silence. Then footsteps heading toward the door I was hiding behind. When his shadow stopped directly outside, I almost lost control of my bladder. "I know you're in there," he whispered. The doorknob began to turn in my hand. The doorknob kept turning slowly, deliberately, like he wanted me to feel every second of it. I tightened both hands around the metal, bracing my foot against the dirt floor of the hidden room. My palms were slick with sweat. If he pulled hard enough, I knew the door would open. There was nothing but my grip holding it shut. Then I saw it. A thin sliver of light cut across my face as the door cracked open an inch. Enough for me to see half of Luke's eyes staring through the gap wide, unblinking, shining with that same disturbed excitement I'd seen on the camera feed. And he was smiling. The tire iron wedged between the frame and the door a second later, forcing it wider. The wood groaned, the hinges screamed, and my grip slipped. "Found you," he breathed, voice low and shaky with adrenaline. Everything in me screamed move. I didn't try to hold the door anymore. I did the opposite. I let go. Luke had been pulling with all his weight, so when the resistance disappeared, he stumbled backwards into the basement, arms flailing. His flashlight clattered across the floor, the beam spinning wildly across the ceiling. I charged. I aimed the strobe setting of my metal flashlight right into his face. He shrieked, blinded, instinctively covering his eyes. That was the moment. I swung the flashlight like a bat, putting every ounce of fear and rage into it. The metal cracked against his collarbone, a sickening crunch filling the basement. He screamed and dropped the tire iron. I didn't stay to see if he got back up. I sprinted up the stairs, 2 at a time, nearly tripping on the last step. Behind me, I heard his boots scraping against concrete. Then, a roar. He was coming. I slammed the basement door behind me, pointless, because the lock was broken, and scrambled across the hardwood floor toward the front door. My socks slipped. My knees smacked the floor. I clawed at the deadbolt. Behind me, bang. The basement door flew open. The deadbolt clicked just as I heard him hit the hallway. I ripped the front door open and bolted across the lawn, screaming at the top of my lungs. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the neighbor's house barefoot, lungs burning, heart exploding. I pounded on the door like a man possessed, until a trembling older woman cracked it open with her phone already in her hand. I stumbled inside, babbling incoherently, shaking so hard she couldn't understand me until she pressed me into a chair and called 911. When the cops arrived, Luke was gone. His car was missing. His room was empty. Not a trace of him in the house. At least, not at first. What the police eventually uncovered still haunts me. The officers searched every inch of the home, and the deeper they went, the stranger things got. The root cellar I hid in, it wasn't a storage room. It was a bedroom, a makeshift bunker. Inside, they found a stained mattress on the floor, a bucket he'd been using as a toilet, food wrappers stacked in a corner, a pile of clothes, a sleeping bag. He hadn't been traveling for work. He hadn't left for even a single night. He'd been living underground, slipping upstairs when I went to work, watching me through hidden cameras, using my bathroom, eating my food, moving through the walls. The officers traced wiring behind the drywall and found a narrow crawl space behind Luke's master bedroom, a concealed passage connecting to the HVAC vents. Inside that crawl space, they discovered a sleeping bag, empty water bottles, a flashlight, a hole drilled through the bathroom wall, directly facing the shower. He'd been watching me even when I thought I was alone, watching me sleep, watching me cook, watching me lie in bed with my eyes closed. He had access to every room. But the worst discovery wasn't the cameras. It was the freezer in the garage. I had walked past it dozens of times. I'd never opened it. Inside was the real homeowner, an elderly man named George, who hadn't been seen in months. The man whose name was on the property records. Luke wasn't Luke. His real name was Elias Vance, and he had been squatting in the house after murdering the owner, posing as him long enough to post an online listing for a roommate. He didn't want money. He wanted company. Someone to observe, someone to stalk, someone to live with, like a hunter lives with prey, close enough to touch, just hidden enough to stay amused. And I walked straight into his trap. The police interviewed me for hours, combing through every detail. Eventually, they admitted something chilling. Elias had done this before. Not in the same city, not even the same state, but the pattern was too similar. An online listing, a clean house, cheap rent, strict rules, a disappearing owner, and a tenant who always ended up leaving suddenly. Sometimes they disappeared, sometimes they moved away, sometimes they were never seen again. But Elias, he always vanished, just like he vanished after chasing me up those basement stairs. They put out a nationwide warrant, they tracked his known aliases, they ran his face through databases and checkpoints. Nothing. He was gone within hours. Like he already had an escape plan, like he'd done this before. Like he was waiting for his next house, or his next tenant. I'm 30 now, and I still live alone. Second floor studio apartment. No basement, no shared walls, no vents big enough for a camera, no crawl spaces. Before bed, I check every lock, every window, every closet, and every night, without fail, I place a piece of black tape over my laptop camera. Not because I think it'll stop someone like him, but because it reminds me that people like him exist. Sophisticated, patient, methodical. People who can smile at you like a friendly landlord while secretly burrowing through the walls behind your bedroom. People who don't need to break in because they're already inside. University housing is a gamble. You roll the dice, and you either get a best friend for life, or you get a story you tell at bars 10 years later about the guy who clipped his toenails on the dining table. I was a sophomore at a state college in Ohio, and I had decided to move off campus to save money. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex called The Pines. It was cheap, smelled faintly of mildew, and had walls as thin as paper. I needed a roommate to split the rent, so I used the university's off-campus matching service. That's how I met Silas. Silas was intense. He was a physics major, tall, lanky, with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. When we first met for coffee to see if we'd get along, he barely made eye contact. He stared at his cup, tracing the rim with a long finger. "I keep to myself," Silas had said, his voice a low mumble. "I study a lot. I don't like parties. I require absolute silence after 10 p.m. Sounds perfect," I lied. I just needed someone to pay half of the $800 rent. Move-in day was uneventful. Silas had almost no furniture, just a mattress, a desk, and stacks of textbooks. He took the smaller bedroom near the kitchen. I took the larger one at the end of the hall. For the first month, it was fine. Silas was true to his word. He He was a ghost. He went to class, came home, cooked instant noodles, and went into his room. We rarely spoke more than a polite hey in the hallway. The first incident happened in mid-October. I was cramming for a midterm, sitting on the living room couch at around 2 a.m. The apartment was dead silent. Silas's door was closed. He had gone to bed hours ago. Suddenly, I heard a laugh. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a high-pitched, childish giggle. It came from Silas's room. I froze, my highlighter hovering over my textbook. I waited. No, 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 a voice whispered. It was Silas, but it didn't sound like him. The pitch was higher, strained. Put it back now. Then, the giggle again. I walked over to his door and listened. Silence returned. I figured he was on the phone or maybe gaming, even though I never saw him play video games. I went to bed, a little creeped out, but I shrugged it off. 2 nights later, I woke up to a sound in my room. My eyes snapped open. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp outside, filtering through the blinds. Silas was standing at the foot of my bed. He was facing away from me, looking at the wall. He was swaying slightly, back and forth, like a pendulum. "Silas?" I croaked, sitting up. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam hit him. He was wearing just his boxer briefs. His skin looked gray in the harsh LED light. He didn't turn around. "The numbers are wrong," he muttered. "The red is leaking out." "Silas, you're freaking me out, man. Go back to bed." He slowly turned his head. His eyes were open, but they were glazed over, looking right through me. He wasn't seeing me. He was sleepwalking. I had a cousin who sleepwalked, so I knew not to wake him up aggressively. I got out of bed, carefully walked around him, and guided him by the shoulders. He was cold to the touch. "Come on, buddy." "Back to bed," I whispered. He was compliant. He let me walk him back to his room. I watched him climb onto his mattress and immediately curl into a ball. The next morning, I asked him about it. "Hey, you know you were walking around last night?" I asked while pouring coffee. Silas froze, his back to me. "What?" "Yeah, you came into my room, talking about numbers or something." Silas turned around. He looked genuinely terrified. "No, you just stood there. It was weird, but harmless." "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I have a history of parasomnia. Stress triggers it. Exams are coming up." "I'll lock my door." I felt bad for the guy. He looked exhausted. "It's cool, man. Just maybe buy a latch or something." He did lock his door for a while, but the noises didn't stop. Every night, around 3 a.m., the talking would start. It got louder, more aggressive. Cut it out, peel it back," he would say, over and over again, his voice guttural and angry. I started sleeping with earplugs. But you can't block out the feeling of being watched. One Tuesday, I came home from class early. Silas wasn't home. The door to his room was wide open, which was rare. I walked past it to get to the bathroom, and I glanced inside. My steps faltered. The walls of his room were covered in paper. He had taped pages of notes all over the drywall equations. Diagrams, scribbles. It looked like a scene from A Beautiful Mind, but darker. I stepped closer to look at one of the papers near the door. It was a drawing. A crude, charcoal sketch of a person sleeping in a bed. My bed. In the drawing, there was a tall, dark figure standing over the sleeper, holding something in its hand. I backed away, my heart racing. This wasn't normal academic stress. This was obsession. I decided I needed to confront him. I couldn't live like this. When he came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. "We need to talk," I said. Silas looked like a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair greasy. "Not now. I have to work." "No, now, Silas. I saw your room. I saw the drawings." He stopped dead. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. "You went in my room?" The door was open. "Silas, why are you drawing me sleeping?" He sighed, a rattling sound in his chest. "What does that mean?" "The thing that stands in the corner," he whispered. "Okay, that's it," I said, standing up. "You need help. Professional help. And I can't live here while you figure this out. I'm gonna stay at my girlfriend's place tonight." I went to my room to pack a bag. I was angry, but mostly I was scared. I threw some clothes into a duffel bag. I zipped the bag shut and turned to leave. Silas was standing in my doorway. He was blocking the exit. The lights in the hallway were off, so he was just a silhouette against the darkness. "Silas, move," I said, trying to sound tougher than I felt. He didn't move. "Silas?" He took a step into the room. "I can't let you leave," he said. His voice was different again. It wasn't the mumble, and it wasn't the child's giggle. It was deep, authoritative, and completely lucid. He hasn't finished the work yet. I realized then that his eyes weren't glazed over. He wasn't sleepwalking. He was holding a pair of heavy-duty fabric shears in his right hand. The metal glinted in the dim light. "Who hasn't finished the work?" I asked, my voice trembling, backing up until my legs hit the bed. Silas smiled. It was a wide, unnatural grin that stretched his pale skin too tight. "Me," he said. "I've been practicing while he sleeps. But I'm awake now." And then he lunged. The metal shears plunged downward. I didn't think. I just reacted. I swung the heavy duffel bag up in a desperate arc. The shears punched through the canvas with a sickening thwack, the blades burying themselves into the bundle of clothes inside, missing my forearm by an inch. Silas snarled a sound that was more animal than human and yanked on the handle, trying to free the weapon from the bag. That split second of resistance was my only chance. I kicked out, driving my heel into his stomach. He stumbled back, the wind knocked out of him, but he didn't let go of the shears. The bag was ripped from my grip. I didn't wait for him to recover. I scrambled off the bed, my socks slipping on the hardwood floor, and bolted for the doorway. "You can't go," he shrieked behind me. "The equation isn't balanced." I hit the hallway, my shoulders slamming into the doorframe as I turned. I heard the heavy thud of the duffel bag hitting the floor and the scramble of Silas regaining his footing. I sprinted for the front door. The apartment was a straight-shot hallway, living room, door. But in my panic, my fingers felt like sausages. I fumbled with the deadbolt. Footsteps behind me, heavy, fast. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Silas was charging down the hallway, the shears raised high again, his face twisted into a mask of pure, weeping rage. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, even as his mouth formed a rictus grin. "I have to peel it back!" he screamed. The deadbolt clicked. I threw the door open and practically fell into the breezeway. I slammed the door behind me, knowing it wouldn't latch without the key, and took off running down the concrete stairs. I didn't stop at the parking lot. I didn't stop until I was at the gas station 3 blocks away, breathless, shoeless, and shivering in the cool October air. The clerk behind the glass looked at me like I was a junkie, but he let me use the phone to call 911. When the police arrived at the apartment complex, they didn't find Silas waiting to ambush them. They found him in the living room. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by thousands of scraps of paper. He had taken every textbook, every notebook, and every piece of mail in the house and shredded them into confetti with the shears. He was sitting in the center of the pile, rocking back and forth, muttering variables and constants to himself. They took him away in cuffs, but he was eventually transferred to a psychiatric facility. He had suffered a total psychotic break, likely triggered by severe sleep deprivation and underlying schizophrenia. I thought that was the end of it. I moved out the next day, breaking my lease. I wanted nothing to do with that apartment, but the real horror came a week later, when the police called me to come down to the station. They had found something in Silas's room that they thought I should see, for my own safety and awareness. I sat in a small interview room while a detective slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photos. "We found these taped to the underside of his mattress," the detective said grimly. The first photo was of me, sleeping. The second was of me, sleeping, taken from a closer angle. The third was of me, sleeping, with a hand holding the shears right next to my exposed throat. There were dozens of them. He had been coming into my room every single night for weeks. He hadn't just been standing there, he had been measuring me. But the last photo, the one that still makes me check the locks on my doors 3 times a night, wasn't of me. It was a photo of the ceiling above my bed. He had written on the drywall an invisible UV marker. The police had only found it when they swept the room with a blacklight, scrawled in chaotic, jagged handwriting. Directly above where my head lay every night was a single sentence: His skin is the wrong size. I can fix it. I don't have roommates anymore. I live alone. And I never, ever sleep with the door unlocked. If you've ever tried apartment hunting in San Francisco, then you know desperation isn't just part of the process, it is the process. You start by dreaming big, then slowly accept the depressing reality that you'll probably end up paying $2,000 for something barely larger than a prison cell. So when I saw the listing, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. Room for rent in historic Victorian home, Haight-Ashbury district. $900 month, utilities included. $900 for a room in that area wasn't just cheap, it was impossible. My first thought was that it was a scam. My second thought was that if I didn't at least try, someone else would snatch it up. I emailed anyway. To my surprise, I got a reply within the hour from a woman named Clara. She was cheerful, overly enthusiastic, and wanted to show me the place that same afternoon. When I arrived, the house actually took my breath away. One of those painted Lady Victorians you see on postcards, the kind that make tourists stop and take pictures. Stained glass windows, carved wood details, a porch that looked like it came straight out of a Gothic novel. Clara greeted me at the door. Mid-20s, pink hair, bright smile. The type of person you expect to see working at a plant shop or selling crystals on Etsy. She led me into the kitchen where I met the other roommate, Ben Quiet, lanky, glued to a tablet. They were almost too nice. They gave me tea, asked about my job, laughed at my jokes like I was actually funny. So I eventually said, "What's the catch? Did someone die here? Am I going to discover the house is built over an ancient graveyard?" Clara laughed like I'd told the funniest joke in the world. No. My grandmother left us the house. We don't need the money. We just want a roommate who gets along with the house energy. House. Energy. Ben finally spoke. Old homes make noise, creaks, whispers. You need to be okay with that. I figured he was joking. I couldn't have been more wrong. There was only one rule they mentioned while showing me the second floor. 4 bedrooms. Mine was at the front. Theirs were in the middle. And this, Clara said, stopping at the very end of the hallway, is the storage room. It's packed with old antiques. It's dangerous to go in there, so we keep it locked. Don't worry about it. The door was thick, dark oak, too heavy for a storage room. But at that point, I just nodded and said, sure. I moved in that weekend. For the first 2 weeks, the place was perfect. The kind of perfect that makes you suspicious. Clara and Ben were quiet, friendly, respectful. The house felt cozy, safe. Then things started to shift. It began with the food. Milk disappearing, bread vanishing slice by slice, leftovers gone overnight. I texted the group chat. Me, hey guys, please don't finish my groceries without asking. Clara, I haven't touched anything. Not me either. Maybe you forgot. Stress eating is a thing. I brushed it off. Maybe I had forgotten. Work had been rough. Maybe I was just tired. Then the smell showed up. Every night, like clockwork, around 8 p.m. The upstairs hallway filled with a faint, rotting scent. Sweet, metallic. Spoiled, like wet copper and old meat. 10 minutes later, just as I started to gag, the smell would fade, replaced by the overwhelming scent of sage or burning incense from Clara's candles. Old pipes, she claimed. The plumbing's ancient. But the worst wasn't the food or the smell. The worst was the scratching. It happened at 3:15 a.m. Something about that time felt intentional. I woke up to a faint noise directly behind my bed. It sounded like something large was clawing through the wall from the inside. I bolted upright, listening. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear anything else. After 30 seconds, I grabbed my phone, flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The noise stopped instantly. The house was silent, heavy, suffocatingly silent. Then I saw it. At the very end of the hall, under the storage room door, was a thin strip of light. Someone was in that locked room. I walked toward it slowly, stepping around the boards I knew creaked. The light flickered like candlelight, or a TV screen moving behind furniture. I reached the door and leaned in. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not normal breathing. This sounded sick. Wet. Ragged. Like someone inhaling through a chest, full of fluid. Clara? I whispered. The light under the door went black instantly. The breathing stopped. So did my heart. The next morning, the door was locked again, and Clara was happily flipping pancakes like nothing happened. When I asked her about it, she forced a smile that didn't even reach her cheeks. You must have been dreaming. No, I heard someone inside. I saw the light. She stared at me with dead, flat eyes. Nobody goes in there. The conversation ended with her humming and smiling again, but something in her face told me she wasn't being honest. 2 days later, I stayed home from work pretending to be sick. I waited until they both left. At 10 a.m., the house was empty. I walked upstairs and knelt by the storage room keyhole. Someone had stuffed cloth inside it from the other side. I touched the doorknob. It was freezing. Then a voice whispered from inside, "Please." It was so faint I almost didn't believe it. "Hello?" I whispered back. "Are you okay?" "Hungry," the voice croaked. Every instinct told me to walk away, but morality overpowered fear. Someone might be trapped in there. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a screwdriver, a bobby pin, anything I could force the lock with. I returned to the door, jammed the screwdriver in, and started prying. "Hang on," I shouted. "I'm trying to get you out." The voice hissed back. "Not out. In? Let me in." I froze. "Aren't you inside the room?" I asked. "I'm in the wall," the voice whispered, trembling. "They put me in the wall so he could have the room. Die." Before I could think or react, I heard the front door downstairs unlock. Clara and Ben were home. I sprinted into my room, closed the door silently, and pressed my ear against it. Their footsteps climbed the stairs. They stopped outside the storage room. "Did you hear that?" Ben whispered. "He's awake," Clara breathed. "He smells the new one. He's getting impatient." "We'll feed him tonight," Ben said. "Just make sure the new guy drinks the tea." Alders. My eyes shot to the cup of herbal tea she'd left on my nightstand that morning. I never touched it. I knew right then that if I stayed in that house one more hour, I'd disappear like those IDs in the wall later. I had to run. I waited until their voices faded downstairs, then stepped into the hallway. I made it halfway down the stairs before I saw them. Clara and Ben were standing at the bottom, blocking the exit. Clara held a cast iron skillet. Ben held duct tape. "Going somewhere?" Clara asked, smiling without warmth. Behind me, upstairs, the storage room lock clicked. Click. Then the door began to open with the slowest, most agonizing creak I've ever heard, and I realized I was trapped between whatever lived in that room and the two people who fed it. The sound of that door opening felt wrong, like something old and rotten was peeling itself awake. As it creaked wider, a wave of air drifted down the staircase, thick, damp, metallic, the smell of blood that had baked into wood for years. It hit my lungs, and I gagged. Clara and Ben didn't move. They didn't try to chase me. They just looked up toward the landing with this twisted reverence, the kind of expression you'd see on someone watching a religious figure materialize. "Don't move," Ben whispered shakily. "If you run, he likes it." I slowly turned my head toward the top of the stairs. A hand appeared first, if you could call it that. It was pale to the point of translucence. The skin stretched so thin over the bones that each knuckle looked ready to tear through. The fingers were long, too long, ending in thick yellow nails that curled like claws. Then it stepped into view. It had once been a man. Now it was something else entirely, skin sagging over an emaciated skeleton, ribs jutting out like broken fence posts. Its hair hung in a greasy gray sheet all the way to its waist, but the face was what froze me in place. No lips, just exposed yellow teeth and a permanent, wet grin. Its eyes were colorless, milky white marbles scanning the air like it was searching by smell alone. It sniffed, twitching, jerking, like a blind animal trying to locate prey. "Meat," it croaked. Clara took a step forward on the bottom stair and slammed the skillet against the railing. "CL Ang." "Here," she screamed. "Fresh. Daddy, he's right there." The thing snapped its head toward her voice. Then its blind gaze shifted to me. It lowered onto all fours. And then it moved. Not like a sick old man. Not like a human. It crawled with a spider's speed, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach lurch, nails scraping the wood as it barreled down the stairs straight toward me. Instinct took over. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I jumped. I grabbed the banister, vaulted over the staircase, and fell 12 feet to the hardwood floor below. I landed on my left ankle and felt it roll hard. Something popped. Fire shot up my leg. But I was alive. I didn't even have time to breathe before Ben's voice echoed from above. "Get him." He charged down the stairs, duct tape forgotten, bringing all his weight down on me. I kicked out with my good leg and felt his knee bend the wrong way. He collapsed, screaming. Clara was already there, skillet raised like a weapon. She swung down at my head. I rolled. The iron pan slammed into the floor with a deafening crack, splintering wood inches from my skull. Before she could lift it again, the creature shrieked, a sound like a dying animal thrown into boiling water. I looked up the staircase just in time to see it tumble the rest of the way down directly onto Ben. His screams changed instantly. "Daddy, no, it's me, it's me." But the creature didn't understand. Or didn't care. It tore into him with teeth and claws, ripping through muscle like wet paper, snarling, choking, smothering him with its own body weight. Clara dropped the skillet. She lunged toward them, screaming Ben's name, trying to pull the creature off him. I didn't watch what happened next. I used every ounce of strength left in my arms to drag myself across the floor toward the front door. My ankle was useless. I could feel bone grinding every time I moved it. Behind me, the house filled with horrific sounds, wet tearing, bones snapping, Clara screaming, the creature shrieking with joy, or hunger, or both. I made it to the door. I fumbled with the locks. Top lock, deadbolt, knob. The door flew open, and the foggy San Francisco air hit me like a lifeline. I tumbled out onto the porch, then down the steps, landing hard on the sidewalk. I didn't stop crawling until I reached the middle of the street, under a street lamp. I finally dared to look back. Clara was standing in the doorway, covered in blood. Her pink hair matted to the sides of her face. No expression, just hatred, pure, simmering hatred. She didn't chase me. She didn't scream. She just wrapped her hand around the doorknob and closed the door slowly, like she was tucking a child into bed. I don't remember much after that. A passing Uber finally stopped after seeing the blood pouring down my leg. The driver called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. By then, the house looked calm and dark, like nothing had ever happened. They went in armed. They came out pale. The house was empty. Clara and Ben were gone. The creature was gone. A back door, leading to a narrow alley, had been thrown wide open, but they did find the walls. Behind a loose panel of wainscoting in the upstairs hallway, officers discovered a hollowed-out space stuffed with old IDs, wallets, jewelry, 12 in total. 12 missing people who had apparently not vibed with the house energy. In the so-called storage room, they found what the room truly was. It wasn't storage. It was a containment chamber, a padded cell lined with old mattresses to dampen sound. In one corner, they found a water bowl. In another, chains bolted to the floor, snapped long ago. And in a small drawer, they found a birth certificate. Thomas, born 1955. Clara's father. He had been reported missing 20 years earlier. The official report guessed that he had suffered from a degenerative prion disease, something that can be caused by or result in cannibalism. Clara and Ben hadn't just been hiding him, they were feeding him. They believed that as long as they kept him alive, they were being good children. They were never caught. I moved across the country. I bought a small house in a quiet Midwestern town. I built half of it myself. I know every beam, every stud, every wall. I sleep in the living room now, on the floor, away from any shared walls. Because sometimes, late at night, when the house settles and the air gets thick, I swear I hear it, and a thin, raspy whisper from somewhere inside the drywall. Let me in.